did a little bit of everything. My background's in chemical engineering, so I prepared and prosecuted a few hundred patent applications and lots of trademark work and a little bit of everything, and then decided that all the fun is really in court, so I would go in down path of IP litigation, and so that's where I sort of arrived and where I am now.
Right, thank you for that. Now that we've kind of gotten a picture of where you guys are currently, I'm going to ask you to kind of go back to before law school, if you can remember that part, and ask what factors might have influenced you to go into law school, and how has that background helped you post law school? Can you start? Sure.
So I went to college thinking that I would go kind of the chemical route, thinking I would work in the lab. I originally wanted to be pre-med, and then I thought that that would be difficult raising a family and being a doctor and being on call. So I thought I'd work less as an attorney, which didn't turn out to be the case. But I was working in a lab, and I'm so old that this was before smartphones. So I would sit there and I would run these glass samples, and they had to melt and then pressurize, and it took probably 30 minutes. And so I would sit there and watch the glass melt. And you had to do that because if it melted and things started going badly, it would just like be a huge mess. So you had to watch it the whole time, but I was literally just sitting there watching it melt, which is like the perfect intern task, right? But it was very boring, and I was like almost falling asleep every day. And my boss came in, and he had taken the LSAT, but then got this job offer, and he was like, I regret it every day. You should go to law school. You should be an attorney. Like, don't make the mistake I made. And it just so happened that my now husband was going to law school and was 2 years ahead of me. And I thought like, oh, maybe I'll just take the LSAT, see how it goes. And the more I looked into IP, I just really liked it. I liked that I could still have the nerdy science background, but not necessarily be doing it. And I really liked connecting with other people and having something that was much more interactive and personable than being in a lab. And so it just seemed like a good fit. But I didn't grow up thinking of myself as an attorney. And even when I started to do more litigation, it was definitely outside of my comfort zone. But I think I've come to learn that you don't have to be your typical confrontational bulldog in a courtroom screaming at people. Even litigation is much more strategic and thoughtful. And I really like that kind of puzzle solving piece of what I do. It's not your typical courtroom attorney. And I like that.
So I love your comment about strategic and thoughtful, because I think that's the way I think about intellectual property. Let me ask really quickly, of the students here, raise your hand if you already know that you want to be in the IP career space, right? And let's just start with IP attorney. If you want to be an intellectual property attorney, okay? Raise your hand if you're interested potentially in intellectual property career pathways generally, right? Okay, good. So I can try to speak to both of you because I'm someone who, so when I started law school, I did actually, going all the way back to high school, I was sort of a nerd in a sense where I was reading books like All You Need to Know About the Music Business. And I thought that I was going to be an entertainment lawyer from like the age of 14. And so I went to law school thinking I went to law school in Los Angeles. I was headed for entertainment law. I started their entertainment law society in law school. That's where I was headed, right? And until I realized my third year in law school, I've got a lot of student loans I need to deal with. And I got an offer for a law firm to help pay off those student loans at a rate that I was higher than I expected, and decided, what does this look like? And so jumped into wherever I could fit, right? And then the career kind of went on from there. What I never lost sight of, though, is my interest in intellectual property as this strategic space. I don't have a scientific background. And you might be thinking kind of, and I know that, so I could have immediately thought about just stay in the soft IP, as we're calling it, space, copyrights and trademarks, but I became really interested in the strategic space around patent law, but from a transactions. And so I could not sit for the patent bar today. I'm an economics major from Vanderbilt. And so I've built my entire career around transactions in intellectual property. And so from corporate law to the startup that I founded to intellectual property investment banking to what I do now, which is licensing intellectual property and developing startup companies around commercializing their IP. I have sort of forged an entire career around transactions and the strategic intersection between intellectual property and business, which is the class that I teach. So I want to get into that.
So for me, how do I start? So I've been a musician my whole life. I started playing violin when I was 5, and I've just been doing it for as long as I can remember. So my goal was always to find a way to kind of merge those two parts of my life, you know, the musician and then whatever happens after that, right? So I went to, not really sure how to get there. I applied to college as a pre-med major, and I intended to try to be a doctor and still play an orchestra or something. And I took biology and I hated it. And it was like literally the worst class I've ever taken. And I was like, nope. So then I applied for a scholarship at Eastern Kentucky University for music, and I got it. So I joined their orchestra, and I went in as a music industry eventually. Went from education to performance to a whole bunch of things, and did business finally. And I got to take classes like recording, you know, music recording, film scoring, copyright, you know, all of the things that you could do as a music business major. And I got into a class, it was called music business, just generally, and we talked about copyright attorneys and trademark attorneys and how that is, you know, part of the music world. And it kind of hooked me because I sat in on a guest speaker who was an expert witness for music, and he could tell you any piece of music that was sampled, that may have been copied, just right off the top of his head. He was called in all the time for court cases. I think he sat in on a Taylor Swift case one time, and I was like, I want to be you, but with more rights to do things other than right? So I ended up, I graduated, went to law school, took the LSAT, and, you know, started my pathway. So from the very start, I knew I'd be an IP. So I worked my way through that. And that's how I ended up, you know, summarizing at Denver and Joel. And that was the only thing I ever told anybody. I was like, I want to be an IP, that's what I want to do. So I got to work with the IP group since I was, you know, a summer, and it was, and that's kind of how I got there. Yeah, so it was just kind of a, I knew I wanted to do it, and I had to find a way to get together, and it just kind of led me to it.
Nice story. I like to hear the, you know, the opportunities that we've all had to somebody like, here's a panel where we're talking to you about IP, and maybe this is your first exposure to it. I was a chemical engineering undergrad at the University of Texas, set to graduate in 1983, which I realize is long before most people were probably you were born, but that was a really bad climate in this country for the chemical and petrochemical industry. So I was seeing on the horizon. So this is an opportunity story. I'm looking at graduating, being a, you know, 3rd level assistant plant manager in Baytown where they're making cyclohexane, and thinking, I don't really want to do that. Which is what actually watching the glass in the story. So as a junior, I was taking a class called Engineering in a Legal Environment. And it was just a survey class, a semester long, with different portions about roles that engineers can play in the legal field, whether it's being an expert witness, being an environmental lawyer, or being a patent lawyer. So that was my first exposure to it. And as far as I know, all the way back in any portion of my family tree, there's 0 lawyers. So I had no clue what law was going to be about, but I just thought, you know what? These guys made it sound like I could use my technical background. I really like to read, which is a pretty big component in law school, as you know. So I'm going to go for it. And I took the LSAT and ended up going to law school. And when I arrived the first day, everybody's looking at, well, are you interested in it? I said, I'm here to be a patent lawyer. And you can imagine the stares and looks of, what is that? But here it is, you know, 36 years later, and it was the best decision ever. So that's kind of how I got there.
Going back to law school again, what activities or classes did you participate in or take that you feel benefit your IP career that maybe are the type of classes that you would think, or classes that you wish you would have taken or would have taken more seriously, and other activities. So basically, if you could go back to law school, what would you do again, or what would you participate that you didn't participate in again?
Sure, so I would say, take unique classes. If there's something in an area, like I took an advertising law class, with Lori Kraft. I think I also did a sweepstakes class with her, although it might have been more like a First Amendment, generally class, like advertising, but, the more, like, you have to pass the bar. At the end of the day, you have to pass the bar, but anything outside of that you might have an interest in, whether that's cybersecurity, whether that's a particular area, be creative. No one's gonna look at your resume and be like, wow, property law, that's awesome, tell me about that. The more you have something where they can say, it looks like you did this, tell me about this experience, the more you can bring to the table to say, I did these unique things. And to kind of show your interest, join groups and join organizations where you can say, this is who I am, this is what I care about. That's really powerful on a resume, and it's really one of the only ways to do it, because you can't really say, here's who I am based on your job experience. We really want to know who you are as a person, and that comes sometimes from, what you're part of. I would also say, I wish I would have spent more time with like my friends and getting to know more people, because I feel like you see the same people everywhere, and it is a really tight-knit community here. It's a really small, big city. And, I was president of CIP for years, so I've got to plug it. But, the more you go to meetings and you see people, it is the same attorneys, and, we'll bounce around from firm to firm, in-house, firm life, but it's all kind of the same core group. And your friends from law school, they all kind of spread out, and then they all kind of come back. But you kind of keep in touch with everybody. So I wish I had taken more time to know about them and who they are and their family and their backgrounds, because you keep those connections. And I think it's really important to work with people that you like, that you fit in with well, and that just are similar to you. And I don't think I put enough importance on that. I think, you still have to pass the bar. And the other piece of advice I would give is, I feel like I took a lot of classes with the mentality of like, I need to pass the bar, not I need to learn this. And I wish that I had gone back, even like civil procedure and contracts and constitutional law, those things never go away, and they will always come up when you least expect it. And you will be looking at rules and rules of evidence and things where you're like, oh, I'm not a criminal lawyer, I don't need to know that. But you really do. And so I would have told myself in law school to like enjoy it and learn it, not just do what you need to pass the test, right? Like enjoy the experience, meet people, soak it in. I know that's easier said than done. But I think I was just trying to check the box, pass the bar, get in and out, do what I needed to do. And I wish I would have kind of taken that time to enjoy it more.
So for me, I think I agree with everything Ashley just said. For me, the answer would be a simple: unless you know that you just want to do patent prosecution, go take business associations and corporations and an M&A class if you can. The more you can know about business strategy, the better you can be at being an intellectual property service provider, lawyer, anything. Everything that I've ever done right in my career related to advising clients, working in transactions, negotiating deals, has been because I had some acumen about the way a business operates, from corporate governance to understanding corporate approval processes, governance structures. I teach a class within the course that I mentioned at UK called the Law and Business of IP Management. One of the classes is focused on corporate governance related to intellectual property management, managing IP risk and managing IP value, all the way up to the board level, fiduciary duties related to intellectual property risk and value. So the more that you can know about how a corporation operates like a living, breathing thing, the better you can be at advising your clients. Because business strategy has to map with IP strategy. And actually this even gets to patent prosecution, because you can't produce good quality patents for your clients unless you really know how it maps to their business strategy. And so the more you can know about how business operates, the better.
Yeah, I would echo both of those comments, but one thing I would say also is connect yourself with your community right now. I think I wish I had gotten more some CIP things as a student, just kind of getting involved in whatever IP programs that are, offered through your community right now. Because like Ashley said, it's a very small community, and getting to know people early is always a good step, and we'll get great information and just guidance from great IP attorneys that are within your reach. I think I wish I'd done more of that. Besides that, I took the IP courses that were available and then did that, and that was good. And in addition, just working on your leadership, so doing things that will give you the confidence that you need to speak with clients and apply for jobs and be an attorney within the IP group and doing things like that. So I was involved in student governance and just all of those things. So doing little things like that was really good. But I think the main one is staying connected with your IP community and getting out there and making yourself known and making others know that you're interested.
Yeah, those are all great comments. I think, when I look back to law school, one of the things that comes to mind, and maybe it's partly colored by the fact that I ended up doing mostly litigation, but I really enjoyed the opportunities like the moot court and the moot court competitions, the trial advocacy class, even though it wasn't an IP trial, but it was getting an exposure to something. If you feel like you have some potential for maybe wanting to be in litigation or be a litigator, then exposing yourself during law school to opportunities to, whether it's trial advocacy or appellate advocacy, all of which could be relevant. When you get into the law firm setting, in particular, you aren't necessarily going to right out the gates give lots of first chair opportunities to run cases. So if you want to get frontline experience, I think those type of clinical courses, and I don't know about NKU, but if there's any type of sort of a pro bono offering or an IP clinic setting where you can have sort of defined interactions with potential clients and learn about how you interact with what would be potential clients in the future, that would be a skill that would have been good to learn early on. So those are the things that come to my mind. And then in terms of the keeping a good network and keeping in touch with people, it's useful for a couple of reasons, because as Ashley pointed out, this community, or the Cincinnati legal community, Northern Kentucky as well, is fairly small. So you do tend to run across people repeatedly, but also your law school classmates that aren't in IP, they can be a source of business or referrals later on in life. So it's a practical reason to stay in touch, but it's a realistic thing.
Great. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any?
Please ask.
Yes. Can you talk more about the Cincy IP? I don't know anything about that at all.
Sure. So CIP, so we put on CLEs each month, and a CLE is your continuing legal education. You have to get a certain amount of credit hours each 2 years, every 2-year biennium. And so we offer an hour of that credit over lunch. We've been kind of alternating with webinars versus in person. The problem for students is a lot of times it conflicts with class schedules. It is typically from noon to 1:15. We say 1:15 because almost every speaker we've ever had runs over because we tend to like to talk and there's so much to fit in. But we also try to do a lot of networking events. So we've had coffee events, we've had happy hours. You just sign up for the emails at the website ncip.org. Or feel free to shoot me an email, I'll get you involved. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to just kind of go and learn about different topics. It is a very broad spectrum of IP issues that we cover, and every month is different. So some might be really interesting, some might not be. You just kind of can pick and choose what fits with you in your practice, but it's a great way to just meet people when it's in person, especially just kind of sit down at a table and introduce yourself. It is $35 for non-members, although I think we discounted to $5 for students. We're pretty good about trying to cover that cost. So yeah, so it's just a nice kind of monthly luncheon thing to get involved with.
I was gonna add, there's actually is a schedule with Cincy IP, NKU and UC April.
Yes, April 11th, that's right. It's a panel, kind of like this one in networking. I think it's 4:30 to 6 or 4:30 to 6:30. And it's in our building at the Scripps Center. I think it's in Thompson Hines' office. So yes, everyone should go to that. I think it's free. Is it free?
Everything.
It should be free. Heard it here first. But yeah, it's just, you know, sometimes you look at these community events and you think like, this is silly, do I really need to come to this? The answer is yes, you do. You really start to meet people, see people's faces. Don't be shy. You know, it takes me like 3 or 4 times meeting somebody to recognize like their name and where they're from, and don't take that personally. There's like a million things going on in my brain at once, so it's hard to focus. But the more that you can just introduce yourself and, you know, put yourself out there, the better.
You know, be intentional about that. I think it's a great, I know you probably hear that a lot, you know, go network, build your network, but the more intentional you can be about just putting yourself out there, the better. I was a big underdog to develop a career in IP. I mentioned no technical backgrounds, economics major, thought I was going to be an entertainment lawyer, started in corporate law. But when I started my job in corporate law, because I was still so interested in IP, I started a blog. It was called IP Prospective. It's a long time ago. The blogs were cool. And I had another podcast or anything else, but like I just started because I wanted to write about it, learn about it, and let me meet people. And then I, on my own dime, went to a few conferences just to meet some people. And so think about that. There's the Kentucky IP Alliance, the event right after this that you should get involved with. It's a grassroots organization right here to develop a bigger and broader and more inclusive IP community, to learn about all those different career paths. And then there's a lot of great conferences and events around and associations that you can join, many of them with student rates. I was the chair of AUTUM, which is the Association for University Technology Managers. Every research university in the country has an office like ours at the University of Kentucky that manages intellectual property. It's a 3,000 person organization. If you're interested in sort of academia, universities, but also intellectual property, great organization to try to get involved with. So do some homework and just get engaged, be intentional about it.
One tip I would give is, for me, it was always good to have kind of like a event buddy. So I had a friend that we would go to all these things together, and it made it a little bit easier, especially when you're like in this massive, like a, you know, attorneys and you're like, I don't know what to do. It's always good to have like just that little bit of support. So find someone who's interested in that as well and take them with you, you know, go to events, go to conferences, go together. And yeah.
And for those that are interested in the non-direct, so obviously there's the American Intellectual Property Law Association, but for those that raise their hands, if you're interested in sort of alternative IP careers, talk to me after this. I've got a list of organizations, companies, career paths that I'd be happy to talk with you about that are outside of traditional IP law.
Thanks for that. That's great. Any other questions that anybody has? Okay, I will move on to my next question then, which is moving on from law school. When you were starting to look at getting your first job post law school, what things influenced that decision, and what recommendations do you have for students possibly in that position to look for in a first job, and maybe even some red flags to look out for?
Sure. So I would say one thing that really surprised me was how honest we are, at least I am, when we're interviewing people. I think I always thought that, your typical interview, like everybody's happy and it's very like buttoned up. I think for most law firms, they will be pretty honest with you about the true culture and the true thing that you ask, but you have to ask the right questions. Everyone will say, we're so collegial, we really get along, we like each other. But you have to kind of dig in a little bit more. And I think you also should be really transparent about who you are, what you like, what you want to do. It's okay if you don't know that. It's okay to not know that path, but be transparent about it. You don't have to be someone you're not, because typically there's a very specific need for specific people. And if we can place you in the right spot with the right clients, with the right partners, in the right field, you will do well. And we want you to be happy. We want you to stay there. We want you to be a good fit. So it needs to be a fit from both sides. And I think I didn't realize how much of a partnership it was. I thought it was mostly like, here's how great I am. It's much less about your accomplishments and much more who you are, what you like to do, how you like to work, and what clients you'd be a good fit for.
That's really good advice. Just be honest with, one thing to think about is the best thing about the growth, I call it the evolution of IP as an asset class, but just the growth and opportunities in IP careers, is that you can be an introvert or an extrovert, and there's great career opportunities. You don't have to just sort of militate towards the IP litigation, because that's where the large firms and bigger money is available. There's, if you love just like forensic financial models and things, there's IP valuation, and there's damages expert, great careers at damages expert testimony firms that focus on intellectual property. There's lots of ways to make a career in IP. Just be honest with sort of what your strengths are and what kind of a person you want to be as you develop your career. And you can seek those out. And when you go through interviewing, they'll kind of sniff that out, right? There's transactional stuff, there's litigator opportunities, but you have to sort of fit yourself into square peg round hole. There's an opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, and going a little bit before that, stay in contact with your career counselor and your career, guidance person that you have. So I think the person I had was Lisa Moore. I think she's still there. I was in her office as much as I could be, and we talked through strategies. She looked at my grades. She looked at my resumes, all of that, to get me in front of the right people, right? To look for the job postings that she thought fit me the best. And that helped me a lot, because when I did get to those interviews, there was at least that initial connection, because we had done that background, right? We looked up the people I was going to talk to when we've done that. So there was a little bit more of I was able to take control of the things that I could control. So when I got to the interview, it was easier to be myself, be open, and let them in and do all that stuff. And from there, at that point, it's really up to the interview and to the company of whether you get hired. But start where you can really control. And if you haven't been to your career counselor yet, go do that. Because she should be the person that can spend most of your time, especially as a law student, because you go to a student job, afterwards.
Well, I will say that in the time frame when I was looking for a job, there was a different sort of mentality. I think people would, at least this was my impression at the time. Bear in mind, again, this was 1986. It's not particularly relevant, except the fact that whereas then the conventional wisdom was, oh, there's an IP boutique law firms. There's big general practice firms that have an IP section or department, whatever. And then there's corporations that have patent attorneys. So which of those is it that you're interested in? That was kind of what was presented. And so through the interviewing process, I kind of determined that I thought an IP boutique would be the best fit for me. And I say that because I did stick with that, and I have been at the same firm for this whole time. But I have seen a lot of changes over the last 36 years. In particular, I've been on a hiring committee since about 1995. And so, it used to be that like no associate leaves the law firm. They join a law firm and they stay at the law firm until they're no longer able to be a lawyer. That's not the case. It hasn't been the case for quite a long time, actually. So while you may have a vision of what you think would be your ideal job, you may not get what you think is your ideal job first. You may get a job that becomes your ideal job because it changes, or you have 17 options, as he was pointing out, in the IP space, not just 3 little silos that are very different from each other. So I think staying open-minded, being flexible, and again, keeping in contact and branching into, as many different kinds of things that are outside of the specific law school experience. And I'll plug one, which is the Federal Bar Association. It's another local chapter of the national organization, and it's focused on practicing in federal court. So again, if you have an interest in some kind of litigation path, that would be another place where you can network with not just lawyers, but also judges fairly frequently. So that's a good opportunity. But the takeaway from what I have to say is, don't just try to dial into what you think is going to be the perfect job, because I'm the only one here who has got the same job that I had when I started. It seems like. And so, I think that's great for everybody else.
You must be good at it.
Thanks. To some extent, that would be true.
I had one more thing that I forgot to mention, which is one thing you can do as a student. I think a lot of students overlook, and I preach this to every class that I teach every year at UK Law, is you can publish. If you want to so think about, now's the time to try to market yourself, and in interviews is a way to market yourself, but of course the resume is too. And the traditional things like being on law review and doing moot court stuff, those are great also. But if you really want to set yourself out as, I care deeply about IP, go publish. Anyone can do research. There are law reviews that allow student publications. There's also journals and business journals and others that you do good research and come up on a timely and important topic. You can go publish. I mentioned I wrote a blog early in my career, but before I graduated law school, I actually published 2 law review articles and 2 business journal articles because I loved research, I loved IP, and I found the places that would allow student publications, and that helped a lot.
And a big topic right now is ChatGPT. So you
That's
guys want to get with.
There are so many issues about scrubbing data and copyrights, and can you own the final product, and
Topics that you all, frankly, are probably better to write about than many of us, to be honest, right? I
And
don't shit. Yeah, I'm
topics
scared.
that like the copyright office can't figure it out. So like they need, I shouldn't say it that way, but they kind of need the guidance of, we have these older laws that don't fit emerging technology. Where does that go? And it drives me crazy with software because it doesn't fit well with patent or copyright or trade secret. So we kind of throw everything at it and make it work because it just doesn't fit well. And as things evolve, that's going to change, but it changes with you. It changes with papers and research and articles and pushing and advocating for that change, which hopefully at some point in our lives happens.
Great responses, thanks. So in getting that first job, what was like maybe the most challenging thing moving from law school to now being a practicing attorney?
So I'm sure everyone will tell you practice is very, very different from law school. I think it's a huge shock when you first get there and it's just like a new world. And I think it's really hard for someone like myself who has been practicing to remember what you don't know. So a lot of times I may use words or phrases that you don't know, and it's not, you shouldn't be embarrassed about that, but you have to call people out and say, like, can you explain what an office action is? Because I don't realize that you don't know that terminology. I don't realize that you don't speak the same language. And I think that's a barrier we see a lot with summer associates, is I'll just give you this paragraph long speech about what I need you to do. And then they're like, so what is an office action? And it's like, you let me go this whole time about this project. And you didn't even understand kind of the fundamental, and that's not your fault. And that's not necessarily law school's fault. It's just kind of a gap that you have to bridge. So I would be very, open about what you know, about what you don't know, things that you don't understand. Make sure that you're always on the same page, because I think the frustration happens when you're just on two different wavelengths, and then you're billing 50 hours to something in the wrong direction. And that's when it's hard to kind of correct. I think, touch base a lot, be very honest about like, this is what I'm doing. Am I doing this right? And being honest about like, I don't know this, because I have been practicing for 8 years and I still feel like some days I'm winging it. I still feel like some days, like, do I really know what I'm talking about? Am I really comfortable here? And it takes a really long time for that imposter syndrome to go away and to feel like, I've got this. I don't know that it really ever truly does, honestly, but that's normal and you'll feel that, and that's okay. And I think just finding somebody that allows that communication. And I think, going back to the interview process, be careful with who you interview with. A lot of times you interview with this like hiring committee full of like bright, shiny, go-getting people who are just like warm and wonderful. And that might not always be who you're working for, and they could be vastly different from that hiring committee. So make sure you know who you're going to work for, because that really dictates your relationship, that really dictates your workload, and that dictates how much leadership you get, how much mentoring you get, how much you can kind of bug them during the day. You need somebody who's willing to invest time in you, and you can find that. It's just, you have to make sure that you're getting that. So, the more that you click with somebody that you're going to be working directly for, and that goes both ways, right? Like, even if you are introverted or if you hate certain things, like, you will find somebody in the city who is just like you and who will like that and appreciate that, who will give you feedback in a way that you need it. Some people love a lot of feedback, some people hate it. Like, find a mentor that matches your style, and that's where I think you really thrive.
Yeah, so to Ashley's point, I got a good story about ask before you start to do something. My first 2 weeks at the law firm, I was in the corporate M&A group, and I got asked by one of the senior partners in that group to go draft the schedules for an M&A purchase agreement. And I didn't know what it meant. And I sat there and I was embarrassed to ask. And so, because I didn't know what a schedule was, right? So I produced this agenda looking thing. It was like a timeline, right? I brought it back to him and said, here's the schedule. And just laughed in my face. A schedule is actually a package of exhibits to the purchasing agreement. That was not what I produced. And so that was a good learning case for me, to just ask questions. It's okay. Just to ask people, to learn. People understand that you need to learn. My one piece of advice that I'll put on top of everything Ashley just said, that is try your best to just learn how a law firm works before you get in there. It's not just about practicing law, understanding the dynamics of the structure of a law firm, how you buddy up to a partner and receive billable hours from them. Relationships are important. Seeking out the type of work you want to do. Understanding just how the organization works is a really important part of being a good attorney.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. One thing that I will say that was something that I had to work through is transitioning from the mind of being a student to being an attorney. So like that little gap in between right after law school, when you're just about to start and you're kind of just like deer in headlights. You're just like, what? Like, what is happening? That was always hard for me, but I think over time, asking questions and letting the partners and the senior associates that I was working with realize that I don't know what I'm doing, and I have no clue to ask questions, and letting myself feel comfortable asking those questions. That kind of helped me get out of that deer in headlights. Because also, as an introvert, that's always hard because I want to do it myself. I want to go into my head and research it. I use Google and I look up things and I'm like, this is what this is, okay, great, and then I'll go to the senior associate or the partner and be like, hey, is this right? And generally they're okay with that sometimes, if they're like, hey, that is what that means, or kind of getting kind of a background. So understand how you work as a person as well, because sometimes if you can find the answer, it's okay to find the answer and then go get confirmation that that's the answer, right? So if you can look up, hey, what's an office action? It's okay to go online USPTO and say, what's an office action? And read it, and then go to before you start, of course, and go and be like, hey, this is what I understand that it is. And it kind of cuts down when we're talking about the senior associate partner having to explain this massive thing to do. So do the work that you can do at that time. It gives you a bit of confidence, if that makes sense. So if you can do it, if you can control it, do it, and then move on and ask questions. That's one thing I did that I thought was helpful. And of course, mistakes happen. They happen a lot, especially as a first year. And my conductor, my music orchestra conductor, used to tell us this all the time: make mistakes and make them loud, because you can't fix it if the conductor can't hear you, or if they can't see you. Right, because if you're in the middle of an orchestra and it's like you're in the middle of a bunch of associates, kind of the same concept, right? And everyone's busy. He's conducting the whole orchestra. The partner is conducting the entire department or practice group, right? They can't see and watch and see when you're doing something wrong. So go tell on yourself. Say, hey, I did this. Give them time to fix it. You're not going to get thrown out. No one's going to fire you. You're a first year, you're second year learning, right? So make mistakes loudly. Try not to make them, but if it's going to be made, let someone know as soon as you can. I think that was hard, and that goes back to just that mentality of going from student to associate, and just realizing that, you know, it's okay because you're learning, right? Like, it's okay to make mistakes. As a student, you think, I can't not get an A, or I can't do this, I can't let people know this, right? Like, but when you're an associate, like, it's that time. That is the time to make mistakes. You don't want to wait till you're year 4 and you have no idea what you're doing, and no one knows that you have no idea, right? so let yourself grow and let other people help you grow, right? So that's what I think.
A couple of things that come to my mind that are different from what has already been said are, one thing is to, if there's something that you have a great passion for, which is about music, and you wanted to put a law career to encompass that. And so you may have something that you're passionate about, and you're continuing to participate in whatever that is while you're in law school. Don't just drop off the face of the earth when you start working and not continue to do things that you have passion for that are outside of work. Because as everybody here probably will attest, you know, going to work for however many hours a week it is, isn't the only thing there is to life. And you need to incorporate that early, because if you go from, oh, I have this law school lifestyle, you know, I have classes at different times, and sometimes I go to the gym at night, sometimes I go in the morning, and sometimes I do all these different things. Now I'm getting this job. 8, leave at 6. When am I going to do all that other stuff? Don't make your life so hard. Try to morph into whatever the schedule you want to have in a way that allows you to satisfy and fulfill your work obligations, but you still keep a handle on the parts of life that are outside of your job or outside of law school, in the case maybe right now, because that's where you're going to ultimately find probably your most happiness. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is sort of trying to get a handle on what expectations are. I remember when, you know, smartphones came out. I mean, it was this century, last century. So before that, you know, you leave work on Friday and you'd come back on Monday. And maybe you'd go to the office over the weekend. Maybe you'd go to the mailroom and open an envelope and read a letter that you got from somebody, maybe. But you weren't checking your email at 9 p.m. on Saturday night when you're out doing whatever because you think you have to. Just establish what the protocols are so you're not either feeling like you're just falling behind or you're doing way more than you need to do to be accountable. Just find a balance. Bottom line is try to find a balance amongst all the different things, because in the long run, you'll have a much more enjoyable.
And one point on that, I think when I started out as a first year, I thought like, I have to respond, I have to turn work fast, like as fast and as cheap as I can get this, the better. That really isn't the mentality for attorneys early in their career. I want you to be the expert. I want you to have looked at it from every angle. I want you to be resourceful. I want you to come to me with that bank of knowledge and say, I've looked at this and this and this and this, and here's what I think. I don't want you to respond to an email quickly and then be wrong, right? Because I need to rely on that. I want you to dig into it and think about it and come with strategy and thoughts and kind of take ownership of the expertise, because I don't typically have that time to get into the weeds. So the more that you can provide value there of having the time to really think about it and approach it, and it kind of goes back to that strategy. Like don't just crank out work product, because that isn't as valuable to have that quick response as it is to have somebody who's really taken the time to be thorough, to think it through, and to, you know, so much of law is kind of copy and pasting, and that's okay. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, check case law, check recent things, like go through that process, because it's hard for us to do that. So the more that you can be really thorough and use resources, and, you know, it's fine to copy from things, it's fine to plagiarize once you're in practice for the most part. But we don't always have the time to do that, to check the latest cases, to have like the latest, greatest forms and format, and to have kind of that thorough review. So I think that was one thing where I was very like quick triggered, like I gotta respond, I gotta do this. I kind of know the facts. Take the time to be very thorough. And I think that's really helpful.
There's 3 dynamics to being really good in your career, and I call it the RWR. You have reliability, work product, and relationships, and you can't just be good at one. So to Ashley's point, you can't just be good at being reliable, responsive, right? If your work product is bad and you don't have good relationships, you have to be good at least 2 of those, if not all 3, and it has to be kind of a balance. So think about that. It's good to be responsive. It's good to be reliable. Your higher ups will want that. But you have to also balance that with ensuring you have good work product and your relationship with them. That'll trump all of it, to be honest. If you make mistakes, your work product is bad, or maybe you miss an email and don't respond. If you have a good relationship with them, that will help that be okay.
And to follow up with Ashley's looking up and checking your resources, also another thing to do is if you're working for a specific partner, a lot of law firms have kind of databases that anybody's work in that. Go look for work that person has specifically done, or template format, things like that. So when you go to them, they're not like, hey, I don't like it like that, go redo it. This is what I want, right? Like, use your resources in that way as well, because that also helps with your relationship, because that person then knows, hey, you know, they're trying to help me and make this easier, right? So make sure you learn your partner and who you're working with. Ask them questions. How do you want this? Do you want me to call? Do you want me to go to your office? How do you want this done? Right? Get that information from the get-go. And that does build on your reliability, your relationships, and every aspect of it.
All great stuff. So I'm going to open it. Oh, yeah.
What do you wish that you had done your final year of law school before starting your first job? If you could go back and say, there's one thing I wish I had learned or focused on or spent time with or network, whatever it was, that would have helped you in the beginning.
I would have traveled the world, go do it and have fun. I feel like now I can't take time off. Even we're going to Disney next week with my kids for the first time on an airplane. I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, and it's going to be intense. But even just like preparing to be out, there's not a lot of people that do what I do for the clients that I do the work for. So my husband, who is at the third, just kind of like passes his entire work to somebody else, and it's like, here you go. And doesn't understand that I can't do that. I can't just nothing out of office and check out. I have clients who need me. I have things that are going to come up. We never know what's going to happen. And there's just no one else who does exactly what I do. Not to say that that's like a great special thing. It's just, I have kind of a very niche practice. But because of that, I can't just turn it off. I can't just pass it to somebody else. And so even when I go places and do things, which I should do more, and I would encourage all of you to like have that balance so you don't burn out. But it's hard to turn off, it's hard to not check emails, it's hard to not pull out my laptop at night. And so I think I would just encourage you to do it now. You know, travel the world, enjoy it, whatever speaks to you, whatever you love to do, do it. Don't wait. And I think it's really important. We see a lot of women kind of burn out a little bit. And a lot of times once you have kids, it's really hard to maintain practice, and you've worked so hard and you've been that like overachiever, and it really is hard to stick it out. And now that my kids are getting older, I'm so glad that I stuck it out. I'm so glad that I didn't go part-time, that I didn't go in-house, that I didn't quit. Not that there's anything wrong with those things. It's just you see it a lot that like it's really hard at that point. It gets better. It gets a lot better. But the more that you can enjoy it now while you have kind of that freedom, while you're not checking emails, you're not obsessing over work, take time to find things you love and do it. And make sure that that is a priority in your life. And it should be after your career. It just gets a lot harder to prioritize.
I was gonna say something like that. I was fortunate enough to have my offer and job accepted with my law firm before my third year started. And that's a luxury. So I think my answer to this would be a little different depending on whether you are still trying to develop your job opportunities or not. But in either case, the thing that I'll add, I agree with Ashley, you should enjoy your last year of freedom. But that's the time to build your brand. I mentioned the things you can do in law school in addition to participating in the things that the extracurriculars that the law school offers and taking the classes that you might not have been able to take until your third year. That's also when I mentioned like the research and articles that I published. That's when I got that kind of stuff done. That's when I started my blog. I started trying, and that's when I actually paid for my own way to go to attend a couple of conferences because I wanted to start sort of seeing what the world was like and develop a network. So think about in your third year building your brand in ways that you really can't in your first 2 years of law school. Because you're so buckled down and you're trying to get the law review or moot court or just get the grades and the job. Think about other alternative ways to build your own brand in that third year, which can include your network. Your brand is absolutely intertwined with the network you have.
I like those. I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum. Rest. You're tired. Law school was hard. You're up late, you're studying, and then you're about to jump into it times 10, right? So rest. And if that does involve traveling, do that. And if you rest better, by writing and learning and doing that, that's fine. But if you are the type of person that just needs to sleep, like you don't have to take a bar trip. I think I went to DC super close. It was like 3 days, and then I came home and I slept a lot. So, take the time that you need, know yourself, know what you need as an individual, right? And do that. So that's what I think. And if you need to see people, see family, see friends because you haven't gotten to do that, just like do what you need to prepare yourself for probably an uphill run for the rest of your life. So
It's great though. It's great.
it's really not bad at all. Like, there are so many options in different career paths, but like prepare yourself. Like I used to be a runner. Like I would rest the day before I ran, right? Like that's what I did. I rested because I knew I was about to do something hard. Just do what you need to do. And for me, when I was a runner, it was sitting watching SpongeBob and eating a lot of Warriors. So I was about to run out the next time. But like take your time, do what you need for yourself, and until before you get bombarded, just take a break. So,
I'm team travel. I took the bar exam in Columbus, flew from Columbus to Milan, Italy, and then to Greece for about a month, and then came back and started my job after Labor Day. So, whatever it is that you can do. I mean, it doesn't, obviously not every job opportunity has the flexibility to do that, but I think the theme is, you are going to start a job that is potentially going to be one of the most taxing things that you experience yet in your life at this point. But you're at the beginning of, you don't even know where it can take you. So I think just being in a place that's calm and pressure free before you start would be great, for whatever it takes to get there.
It's like a reset.
Yeah.
Where you need.
This is the point where I'm opening up to questions, so are there any? Yeah,
Did any of y'all have non-IT related jobs or internships prior to your career? And if so, what were your feelings about that? What were your employers' feelings about that? About your lack of experience, if you will?
I can take that. So I interned for like the orchestra. You haven't heard of it? You should, because it's awesome. I'm on the board now, but I interned for them for a year before I even went to law school, so between undergrad and law school. And they were always really supportive about what I wanted to do. I didn't I told them I wanted to eventually go to law school. So at some point, we had that talk, and at some point I was doing it. My LSAT studying materials while I was working at work and doing it at lunch and doing things like that. But it didn't really hurt me when I was looking for a job one day. Like having experience as a legal person before you go to law school or before you get a legal opportunity, isn't really that big of a deal. But yeah, I don't think it's a huge thing. I didn't do anything other than, so that was before law school. And then after law school, I did do an internship with I was still working with the KSO, but I also found time to do a secondary type legal thing. So if you have the time, maybe try to fit it in there. But I don't see why that would be like the hugest, at least. I know a lot of people that did not do that before, and they were fine with it.
And I did my first summer of law school. I took an environmental job actually at Marathon Petroleum in Finley. And I was just like being a go-getter, and they were doing on-campus interviews, and I stopped in and was like, I just want to meet you. I'm a 1L. I know you're not looking for 1Ls, but was hoping to kind of like make the connection, and didn't realize that they weren't hiring for IP work. They don't really do a lot of IP work. And they offered me a job, and they were like, we're taking this chance on you because we don't know how you'll do because you're a 1L, so we'll go for exams, but like we need a response now. And it was really tough. But I liked them and I liked the company, and I thought like, why not try it? It was very different from IP. It was much more questions from the business that basically say, can we do this? Or, oops, we did this, what now? And so then you would kind of dig into the laws, and they would say, can we do X, Y, and Z? And I would start looking through regulations, I would start pulling things, and it was very memo focused. And even the attorneys that I worked with, it was very interpreting laws and regulations, giving guidance, very kind of it goes to the CEO, goes to the executives of like, here's where we stand from a legal position, here are our recommendations, and then the business takes that, and we don't really know what they do. That's very different from my current day-to-day. And I'm glad that it's very different, right? It's very much not that kind of compliance governance role. But when I started transitioning back to IP, my second year, and even when I was looking at jobs, I got that question a lot of like, why would you take an environmental job? Is that what you want to do? Are you confused about it? And so there was kind of some, I wouldn't say pushback, but just some questioning. And so I think, again, that goes back to really showing who you are and what you like. And I was able to say, I did this. This is the experience I got from it. This is what it taught me. And this is my path forward. And I think the thing that we see a lot with people who have a variety of experience, you'll get somebody who has something that they're passionate about. And if that doesn't fit with the job role, it's not that it turns us away. It's that we know that you wouldn't be a good fit. So let's say you love criminal advocacy, and you say like, I'm really passionate about wrongful convictions, and I've done Ohio innocence work, and Mark Godseed's amazing, and we do a lot of work with him and try to support that. That's great, but that doesn't necessarily fit in with our day-to-day. So the more we can make sure that it's still a good fit for you, and it doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't do those things. You should still do the things you care about, but just be honest with kind of, here's what I want. Like, even if I've done these things, here's the path I want for myself. And too often we'll see something that doesn't align. And again, it's not really a red flag. It's just, might make someone think it's not a good fit. So the more you can be vocal about like, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, you know, because typically when we're hiring, and I can say this about all 3 firms that I've been with, we usually have a very specific, very narrow subset of like, we have hours for this client or this work that we are trying to fill. And we will get people who are great, who are just like really exceptional candidates. But if they don't fit in that background, if they don't fit with what we're looking for, we're still going to turn them down, even though they're superstars, just because we're looking for, you know, electrical engineering, IP litigation, or it's something that's like very narrow. And you should never try to make yourself fit into that box, because there's going to be places for you. There's going to be jobs for you. There's going to be a place where you fit perfectly. It's just trying to find that.
So in my career, I've hired about 85 people in my career. I currently oversee a team of about 30, 23 of which I've been the hiring decision maker. So I've seen a lot of resumes, and I've hired and promoted a number of people. There's 2 things that I look for a lot. So I mentioned like Kentucky Orchestra. I love to see that there's something of passion in your life. You're well-rounded. So I look for well-roundedness, not as an accident, but something that like you've been committed to, dedicated to. It's been a part of your life, and it is outside from work. That's something that I think is good to show. Absolutely. The other thing I look for though, and so to the question on like, have you had a job before? I had jobs. I mentioned I want to be an entertainment lawyer. So when I was in college, I interned at Sony Music Publishing at Universal Music Group with the California Lawyers for the Arts. And so there was intentionality that I could show on a piece of paper that I was trying to head somewhere, right? I like to see intentionality in resumes where there's connectedness between, and it doesn't mean you always have to know what you want to do and head there, but there has to be proactivity of some sort, right? I need to see that you're a go-getter of some kind, right? That's really what I want to see. And not every position, I realize you have to be a go-getter, but that's the type of person that I like to hire, and I like to see that somehow. Some indicia that you've wanted to accomplish and head somewhere with planning and some intentionality.
And spend your resume doing that. So often I feel like we see people who are like, you know, #1 server at Applebee's, and I did all of these wonderful, and like, we get that, but you don't have to embellish, you know, so much of your technical background. Like, we know you are good enough. We know, you know, we don't need to see kind of every detail of, oh, I got an A+ in organic chemistry and that was terrible. I don't care about that. I care about like who you are as a person and things that I don't know to ask. I don't know to ask what you love or what you do. And a lot of times people will ask like, oh, tell me about your interests. And I'm one of those people who will be like, yeah, I played volleyball in college. I like to bake. I used to have a cupcake blog, but it's not, you don't get like the essence of me. Like you need to put yourself of like, this is who I am, because they don't know what questions to ask. And so the more you can add things to your resume that make them ask questions and that tell a story of kind of who you are and how you got there, I think that goes a long way. Because you see a lot of, you know, oh, I went to school, I did these things. You know, we've all done those things. I want to know who you are, not the law review article you published and, you know, all of those kind of boxes you check. We know you're good enough. And I think that like imposter syndrome, you always think like, you know, you're trying to push like, I'm good enough to work here. We know you're good enough to work there if you got the interview. We care about if you fit personality wise.
This has all been great. We are actually out of time at this point, but just want to give a big round of thanks to our panelists. They've been wonderful. you all are sticking around for the networking
Absolutely.
session.